Anatoli Petrovich Bugorski is a scientist who encountered an accident in 1978 that no one should have faced. Bugorski was a researcher at the Institute for High Energy Physics in Protvino, Russian SSR, where he worked with the Soviet Union's largest particle accelerator, the U-70 synchrotron. A particle accelerator is a machine that uses electromagnetic fields to propel charged particles to very high speeds and energies and to contain them in well-defined beams. These particles can be used for a variety of purposes, such as studying the structure of matter, developing new medical treatments, or creating nuclear weapons. There are many different types of particle accelerators, but they all work on the same basic principle. A charged particle is injected into a vacuum chamber, where it is subjected to a series of electrical and magnetic fields. These fields cause the particle to accelerate, and the faster it goes, the more energy it has. A synchrotron is a particular type of cyclic particle accelerator, descended from the cyclotron, in which the accelerating particle beam travels around a fixed closed-loop path. The magnetic field which bends the particle beam into its closed path increases with time during the accelerating process, being synchronized to the increasing kinetic energy of the particles. The U-70 is a proton synchrotron with a final energy of 70 billion electron volts. It was built in 1967 at the same institute Bugorski worked at. The accelerator held the world record in beam energy at the time of its construction, and it still is the highest energy accelerator in Russia. On the fateful day, July 13, 1978, Bugorski was assigned the task of fixing a temporary malfunction in a piece of equipment. He called the beam operators in the control room and told them that he would be in the experiment hall in 5 minutes. It was important for Bugorski to tell the beam operators that he would be in the experiment hall because the proton beam was extremely dangerous and was traveling at nearly the speed of light. The beam operators were responsible for ensuring that the beam was safe to operate. They would have checked the beam path to make sure that there was no one in the way before they activated the beam. If they had known that Bugorski was in the experiment hall, they would have stopped the beam until he was safely out of the way. What should have happened next was that the beam operators should have removed the beam from the chamber Bugorski was going in, and the door to the chamber should have been locked with an illuminated sign alerting him that the beam is still active. But Bugorski did not see any of these. While trying to fix the malfunction, Bugorski was leaning over the equipment when he stuck his head in the path of the proton beam of 76 billion electron volts that passed right through his head. He reportedly saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns. However, he did not feel any pain. The beam passed through the back of his head, the occipital and temporal lobes of his brain, the left middle ear, and out through the left side of his nose. The exposed parts of his head supposedly received a radiation dose of 200,000 to 300,000 roentgens. For comparison, a chest X-ray exposes you to about only 0.1 roentgens. Bugorski understood the severity of what had happened but continued to work on the malfunctioning equipment and initially opted not to tell anyone what had happened. Following the accident, Bugorski's life took a harrowing turn as the left of his face swelled beyond recognition. In the days that followed, the skin on his face began to peel, revealing the horrific path that the proton beam had burned through his flesh, bone, and underlying brain tissue. The severity of the radiation exposure was believed to be far beyond survivable levels, and Bugorski was rushed to a clinic in Moscow, where medical professionals could observe what they anticipated to be his impending demise. However, defying all odds, Anatoly managed to survive the ordeal. Remarkably, Bugorski continued to persevere and display extraordinary resilience. He went on to complete his PhD and resumed his work as a particle physicist. Miraculously, there was minimal damage to his intellectual capacity, allowing him to continue his scientific pursuits. Despite his remarkable survival, the accident left its mark on Anatoli's body. He completely lost hearing in his left ear, and the left half of his face was paralyzed due to the destruction of nerves in the area. Though he was able to resume his work, Anatoli experienced an increase in mental fatigue when engaging in intellectual tasks. Additionally, he occasionally suffered from complex partial seizures and rare tonic-clonic seizures as a consequence of the traumatic event. In the official case history of Anatoli Bugorski, doctors conducted a thorough calculation of the radiation dose he received during the accident. A powerful beam of high-energy protons measuring 2 by 3 mm in transverse size traversed through specific regions of his head, including the occipital and mediobasal regions of the left temporal region, the pyramid of the left temporal bone, the bony labyrinth of the middle ear, the tympanic cavity, the jaw fossa, and tissues of the left wing of the nose. The measured radiation dose was substantial, with 200,000 roentgens at the entrance point and an increase to 300,000 roentgens at the exit due to scattering of the material. Theoretically, this dose was considered 100% lethal, surpassing the fatal dose of ionizing radiation by 300 times. The question arose, why didn't Anatoli Bugorski succumb to the accident on that day? Understanding the concept of kinetic energy in particles is crucial to unravel this mystery. High energy particles like protons possess kinetic energy representing their motion energy. When these particles collide with a medium, such as the human body, they interact and lose some of their kinetic energy. The deposited energy from these interactions ionizes atoms, breaks up molecules, generates heat, and disrupts nanoscale structures within the biological material. This cumulative damage can lead to fatal consequences such as cancer or organ failure. However, the ability of a material to slow down energetic particles while they pass through it, known as stopping power, is a critical factor. Nuclear physicists can calculate the distance at which a high energy particle will eventually stop in a given material. In Anatoli Bugorski's case, the proton beam that struck his head possessed an extraordinarily high energy level, effectively making it the most potent particle therapy session in human history. As the beam's energy diminished inversely proportional to its velocity squared, it created what physicists called the Bragg peak. This peak is where the proton beam deposits most of its energy just before it stops. The survival of Anatoli Bugorski can be attributed to the phenomenon of the Bragg peak and the stopping power of the human flesh. His brain tissue lacked the necessary stopping power to bring the high energy protons to a halt, preventing the Bragg peak from occurring within his skull. Consequently, Anatoli did not receive the full theoretical dose of radiation that the U-70 synchrotron could have deposited. Anatoli's survival was partly due to the fortune of the path the proton beam took through his face, avoiding critical brain regions and blood vessels. Although he absorbed some fraction of the energy, it was significantly less than the potential lethal dose. Nevertheless, the absorbed fraction was enough to cause irreversible changes in his mind and body, leaving a lasting impact on his life.